The rain was cold and heavy as Kira stepped off the transport ship. Her boots splashed in shallow puddles, but she did not flinch. She was not here for comfort. She was here for a job. The contract was clear, the payment generous, and the target was supposed to be easy. A human commander who had refused to follow galactic law. Wanted alive. She had done harder missions before, but something in the way the council spoke about him had made her curious. Kira was known across systems as one of the best bounty operatives alive. Her armor was black steel with golden edges, light enough to move fast but strong enough to stop a plasma bolt. Her silver hair was tied back, and her wolf-like ears twitched at every sound. She had no fear of most species, but the way locals whispered the word Deathworlder made her pause. In her mind, it was only a story to scare rookies. Humans were strong, yes, but nothing she could not handle. Or so she thought. The base where the human was last seen was silent when she reached it. No guards, no drones. Just the wind whistling through broken walls. Her sharp senses told her she was being watched. She drew her sidearm and scanned the shadows. The air smelled faintly of fuel and smoke. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned. She moved carefully, each step measured, her eyes sweeping across the ruins. If this was a trap, she would spring it on her terms. A voice cut through the silence. "You're not from around here." It came from behind her, deep and calm. She turned fast, aiming her weapon, and saw him. The human stood with arms folded, dressed in dark furs and light armor, a faint smile on his face. His eyes were sharp, studying her like a predator deciding if the prey was worth chasing. "I know why you're here," he added. "But I'm not going anywhere with you." The way he spoke was not arrogant, but certain. Kira kept her weapon steady. "My contract says otherwise." The man tilted his head, as if amused. "Then make me." It was not a threat. It was a challenge. She felt her pulse rise. This was not the first time someone had resisted, but there was something in his voice that made her understand why the council feared him. He was not just strong. He believed he could not be caught, and a small part of her wondered if he was right. She moved first, trying to close the distance. He stepped aside effortlessly, his movement smooth and quick for someone his size. She tried again, faster this time, but he blocked her strike with one arm and caught her wrist. His grip was firm but not cruel. "You're fast," he said, "but you're not ready for me." She twisted free, her claws grazing his armor. He stepped back, still smiling. "Better," he admitted, "but not enough." She realized he was testing her, not fighting to win. Every second that passed made her more aware of the strange energy between them. He was her target, yet he moved, like a teacher pushing a student to improve. It was frustrating and different. She had expected fear or anger. Instead, he looked at her with a kind of respect, as if she was the one being evaluated. It unsettled her more than any weapon could. She was beginning to understand that this contract would not be simple at all. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of incoming rain again. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. The human glanced toward the horizon, then back at her. "If you want to try again," he said, "meet me at the old arena when the moon rises." Without waiting for her answer, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the ruined city. Kira stood still for a moment, her mind racing. No one had ever walked away from her like that. No one had ever told her to come and find them. Kira stayed in the ruins long after the human had gone. The sound of the rain against the broken walls seemed louder now. She replayed the brief fight in her mind, her pride stinging at how easily he had slipped from her grip. No one had ever dared to give her an order and walk away. She had always been the one in control. Yet here she was, standing alone, wondering what would happen when she met him again. She moved to a dry corner and sat down, resting her weapon across her knees. Her instincts told her to hunt him immediately, but another part of her wanted to understand why he had chosen the arena. It was a bold move, almost reckless. A place like that would give her no cover, no advantage. He had to know that. Which meant he believed he could still win. That kind of confidence was dangerous. By nightfall, the city was a dark maze of shadows. The moon rose behind clouds, casting silver light on the broken streets. Kira moved quietly, her boots making no sound on the wet ground. She could smell faint traces of him, a mixture of steel, leather, and something wild. Her heartbeat quickened as the arena came into view. The ancient stone walls stood tall despite the centuries, scarred by battles long past. The gates were open, waiting. Inside, the arena floor was wide and empty, the sand dark from the rain. The air was heavy with the scent of stone and rusted metal. Kira stepped forward, her eyes scanning the shadows along the walls. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. He was there, standing calmly, as if he had been waiting for hours. His eyes reflected the moonlight, sharp and unshaken. "You came," he said. "Good. Let's see what you can really do." Kira did not speak. She launched forward, closing the gap in seconds. He blocked her first strike and twisted to throw, her off balance, but she rolled and came up ready again. This time, she aimed low, forcing him to step back. They moved across the arena in a blur of strikes and counters. His strength was greater than she had expected, but it was his timing that unsettled her. He seemed to know what she would do before she did it. He caught her wrist again, but instead of holding it, he pushed her back with enough force to send her sliding across the wet sand. She growled, her claws digging into the ground as she stopped herself. "You're fast," he said again, "but you still think like a bounty hunter. Predictable, always looking for the shortest path to the capture." His words hit harder than his strikes. She was used to opponents fearing her. He was teaching her. Anger flared, but it was mixed with something else. Respect, maybe. Or the thrill of facing someone who did not see her as unstoppable. She adjusted her stance, watching him more closely now. She noticed the way his weight shifted before each move, the subtle changes in his breathing. When she attacked again, she aimed not where he was, but where he would be. This time, her strike grazed his shoulder, leaving a shallow cut. He smiled. Better. Then he stepped forward, faster than before, and knocked her weapon from her hand. She fell back, but before she could reach for it, he was standing over her, offering his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm and steady, pulling her to her feet with ease. "You learn quickly," he said. "That will keep you alive." For a moment, they stood close, the sound of the rain filling the silence between them. Finally, he stepped back. "Your contract says you have to take me in," he said. "But I'm giving you a choice. You can keep trying to drag me to the council, or you can hear what I have to say and understand why they want me gone." Kira met his eyes, her mind racing. She had never considered that the council's orders might not tell the whole truth. But now, standing in the rain with this human, she felt the first spark of doubt. Kira did not answer him right away. The rain fell harder, drumming against her armor and the stone walls. She searched his face for signs of deception but found none. His eyes held a steady fire, the kind that came from surviving things most people would not dare to face. She realized she was still holding his hand and let go, stepping back but not lowering her guard. "You think I should believe you," she said. He tilted his head slightly, a faint smile at the corner of his lips. "I think you should see the truth for yourself." His words carried weight, not just confidence but certainty. It made her wonder what kind of proof he could offer that would risk his own freedom. No one challenged the Galactic Council without reason. If he had one, it must be worth more than his life. He turned and began walking toward the far side of the arena. For a moment she considered attacking him from behind, ending this game and finishing the job. But something stopped her. It was not fear. And it was not mercy. It was the thought that if she ended it now, she might never know what he was hiding. She followed, her steps careful but steady. He moved like someone who had nothing to fear, even with a bounty hunter at his back. They left the arena and moved through the ruined streets. The rain washed away the footprints they left behind. The city felt emptier than before, as if the buildings themselves were watching in silence. He led her through a narrow alley, then into an old warehouse with shattered windows and a roof that barely held together. Inside, a small fire burned in a metal barrel, casting a warm glow across the shadows. Two figures sat by the fire. They were human, but smaller and younger, their eyes wide with suspicion as Kira entered. One of them clutched a makeshift spear, while the other stayed close to the man she had followed. "These are my people," he said simply. "Not soldiers, survivors." Kira glanced at the thin blankets, the scraps of food, the cracked water containers. They were barely holding on. This was no rebel army. It was a handful of desperate lives. The younger one with the spear spoke first. "Why is she here?" His voice trembled with both anger and fear. The human man raised a hand to calm him. "Because she needs to understand." He turned to Kira. "The council calls me a criminal because I refused to abandon them. They wanted this sector cleared for their mining project. Anyone who lived here was forced out or killed." His tone did not change, but Kira could hear the steel behind it. She thought back to the mission details she had been given. The report said nothing about civilians. It had spoken only of a dangerous insurgent leader who threatened stability. She had not questioned it before. She always assumed her contracts were clean, but now she saw the faces of the people she was told did not exist, and she could not ignore them. Her grip on her weapon loosened slightly as she realized her target might not be her enemy at all. He watched her reaction closely. "If you still want to take me in, I will not stop you. But know this, without me, they will not survive." His voice was calm, without pleading. He was stating a fact. Kira looked at the two young humans again, their eyes reflecting the firelight. They were not fighters. They were not threats. They were just trying to live, and now she had to decide if her contract was worth more than their lives. The rain outside eased, the sound softening against the broken roof. Kira stepped closer to the fire, feeling its heat against the damp of her armor. The man's eyes stayed on her, waiting for her choice. She realized that every path from here would change something. If she followed her orders, she would complete her mission but condemn them. If she listened to him, she would defy the council and become the hunted instead of the hunter. Kira did not rush her answer. The fire crackled in the barrel, sending sparks into the damp air. The younger humans watched her every move, ready to defend themselves if she made a wrong one. Her training told her to end this now and complete the mission, but something deeper told her to wait. She had spent her life chasing targets. This was the first time she was starting to wonder if the target was chasing her instead. She met the man's gaze. "Show me," she said. A small nod was his only reply before he turned and walked toward the far corner of the warehouse. She followed, the sound of her boots echoing off the cracked concrete floor. He stopped beside a rusted metal door, its hinges bent and worn. With a sharp push, it swung open to reveal a narrow stairwell leading down. A faint glow came from below, along with the sound of soft voices. The air grew warmer as they descended, and the smell of cooked food drifted up to meet them. When they reached the bottom, Kira saw a hidden shelter carved into the rock. Dozens of humans were here. Old men, women, and children. Some sat on blankets. Others huddled around small heaters. Every face turned toward her, some fearful, others simply tired. She felt the weight of their stares more than any weapon she had ever faced. "This is why," the man said, his voice low. "The council's mining will poison the air and water. It will kill them within weeks. They don't care because they don't see them as worth saving. Kira walked slowly among the people, her eyes taking in the thin frames and hollow cheeks. She had hunted criminals who deserved their fate, but these were not criminals. They were survivors clinging to what little they had left. A small child stepped forward, holding a battered metal cup. She looked up at Kira with wide brown eyes and offered the cup without a word. Inside was clear water, precious and rare here. Kira knelt and accepted it, taking a small sip before handing it back. The child's eyes brightened at the gesture. That simple act struck her harder than any battle. It was a reminder that every choice she made here would ripple through all of their lives. The man waited until she stood again. "Now you understand," he said. "If you deliver me to the council, they will move in within days. These people will have nowhere to go, and if you defy them, you will be marked as a traitor. You will be hunted as I am." His words were not meant to frighten her. They were simply the truth. She had lived long enough to know when someone was speaking the truth. Her claws tapped lightly against her armor as she thought. Every contract she had ever taken had been straightforward. Hunt, capture, deliver. This was different. Here, she could see the cost written on every tired face around her. She thought of the council's cold halls and the way they had handed her this mission without a single detail about who the man really was. She was beginning to think they never wanted her to know. The shelter grew quiet, the kind of silence that waits for an answer. Dozens of eyes rested on her, even the youngest sensing that her decision would decide their fate. Kira's instincts urged her to prepare for a fight. If she chose to defy the council, soldiers could arrive at any moment. If she chose to obey, the man's people would vanish under the weight of the council's greed. Either path was dangerous, but only one felt right. Finally, she spoke. "If I stay, they will send more than just one bounty hunter." The man nodded. "I know. That's why I need someone who can stand against them." Kira's ears twitched at the sound of footsteps above, faint but growing closer. The man's gaze sharpened. "You may have to make your choice sooner than you thought." Her hand went to her weapon, not to draw it on him, but to be ready for what was coming. The footsteps above grew heavier. Dust drifted down from the cracked ceiling as Kira's ears picked up the faint clink of metal. Whoever was coming was armed. The humans in the shelter grew tense, clutching their children and pulling them closer. The man's hand moved to his own weapon, but he did not raise it. His eyes met hers, and she understood that if they were going to survive this, they would have to fight together. Kira moved toward the stairwell, her claws brushing against the hilt of her blade. She had fought in tight spaces before, but this one was worse. There was nowhere for the civilians to escape. The attackers would come straight down and find them all in one place. She glanced over her shoulder at the faces watching her. Their hope and fear mixed together. If she failed, there would be no second chance. The first soldier appeared at the top of the stairs, armored in the council's dark steel. His visor reflected the dim light from below. Without hesitation, Kira lunged, slashing upward and knocking him back before he could fire. Another soldier stepped forward, and this time the human man was there, pulling him down the steps and into the wall. The fight was brutal and fast. Each strike meant to end the threat before it reached the shelter. More soldiers poured in, and the sound of weapons clashing filled the stairwell. Kira's movements were sharp and precise, her armor deflecting blows as she struck with claws and blade. The man fought beside her like a force of nature, his strikes heavy and unyielding. Between them, they kept the enemy from advancing, but she knew it would not last. For every soldier they dropped, more seemed to take their place. A flash of light filled the stairwell as a stun grenade went off. Kira's vision blurred, and her ears rang with the shock. She staggered back, blinking to clear her sight. Through the haze, she saw one soldier break past them, heading for the civilians. Her instincts overpowered the disorientation. She launched forward, tackling him to the ground before he could aim his weapon. The soldier hit the floor with a dull thud, his weapon skidding away. The man was already there to cover her, taking down another attacker with a crushing blow. "We can't hold here forever," he said, his voice steady even in the chaos. Kira nodded, her breathing heavy. She could feel the truth of his words. If they stayed in the shelter, the enemy would overwhelm them. They needed to move, but moving meant risking the lives of everyone here. She had never led anyone in battle before. Now, she had no choice. "Get them ready to move," she told him. He did not question her. While he gave orders to the civilians, she pushed the bodies of the fallen soldiers toward the wall, clearing the path to the stairs. Her claws clicked against the floor as she moved, her senses on high alert. The enemy would regroup quickly. She needed to give these people every second she could. Every second mattered. The civilians began to move in a tight group, guided by the man and two older survivors carrying makeshift weapons. Kira took the lead, moving up the stairs with her blade drawn. The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal and ozone from discharged weapons. She stepped over the first soldier she had struck down and emerged into the warehouse. The night outside was dark and wet, but the rain had slowed to a light drizzle. They moved quickly through the streets, sticking to the shadows between crumbling buildings. Kira kept scanning the rooftops, expecting snipers, but none appeared. Either the enemy had pulled back to regroup, or they were being watched for another trap. She could feel the tension in the group behind her, every step a gamble. The man stayed close to her side, his eyes constantly searching the darkness for movement. When they finally reached a narrow passage leading to the edge of the city, Kira stopped and turned to him. "Where do we go from here?" she asked. He looked past her toward the horizon, where faint lights flickered in the distance. "There's a place outside the council's reach," he said, "but getting there won't be easy." She tightened her grip on her weapon, feeling the weight of the decision pressing against her again. The narrow passage opened into the edge of the city, where the cracked road faded into open ground. The wind carried the smell of damp earth and distant smoke. Beyond the ruins, the land stretched into rolling hills under a pale moon. It was open terrain, with little cover for a group this size. Moving through it would be risky. Staying here would be worse. Kira studied the horizon, weighing the dangers ahead. The man pointed toward the faint lights he had mentioned before. "That's the direction we need to take," he said. "It's a long walk, and the ground between here and there isn't safe." His tone was calm, but she could hear the warning in it. This was not a simple escape. This was a test of endurance and survival. She knew the soldiers would return once they realized their quarry had moved. They began the journey in silence, the group keeping close together. The younger humans walked near the center, protected on all sides. Kira and the man stayed at the front, her sharp senses scanning the darkness while his steady steps guided the pace. Every shadow seemed to shift, and every gust of wind sounded like movement. Her claws flexed lightly, ready for the first sign of an ambush. Hours passed, and the cold grew sharper. The moonlight painted the hills in silver and black, creating places where enemies could hide. Kira's ears twitched at a faint sound ahead. Not the wind, not the rustle of leaves. She raised a hand to halt the group. The man stopped beside her, his eyes narrowing. A moment later, shapes emerged from the darkness. They were not council soldiers. They moved too quietly for that. A band of scavengers stepped into the moonlight, their weapons mismatched but dangerous. Their leader, a tall figure with a jagged scar across his cheek, smiled without warmth. "Travelers," he said. "Out here, that means prey." Kira stepped forward, her stance low and ready. She had no intention of letting them near the civilians. The man shifted slightly, placing himself between the group and the scavengers. There was no time for negotiation. The fight was fast and violent. Kira's blade caught the moonlight as she moved, striking with precision. The man fought beside her, his strength breaking through makeshift armor and crude shields. The scavengers were skilled, but they were not prepared for opponents like this. Within minutes, the survivors of the band fled into the darkness, leaving They're fallen behind. The air smelled of blood and cold metal as the silence returned. Kira wiped her blade clean on the grass before sheathing it. The civilians looked shaken, but no one was hurt. The man checked each of them quickly, offering a quiet word or a nod before returning to her side. "We keep moving," he said. "They'll be back with more if we stay here." She agreed without hesitation. Every delay gave the council or the scavengers a chance to find them again. They crossed another stretch of open land before reaching a line of trees. The shadows here were deeper, the air still and heavy. Branches creaked softly overhead. Kira felt the change in the ground beneath her boots as the terrain shifted from dirt to tangled roots. The forest offered cover, but it also made it harder to see what was coming. Her ears stayed alert, catching the smallest sounds between the trees. The man led them to a sheltered clearing where the moonlight barely touched the ground. "We rest here," he said. The civilians settled quickly, their exhaustion clear. Kira stayed at the edge of the clearing, her eyes scanning the trees. She could feel the weight of the day pressing on her muscles, but she ignored it. Rest would come later. For now, she needed to ensure nothing reached them in the night. Taishibinch man approached quietly, carrying a small piece of bread. "Eat," he said. She took it without speaking, breaking it in half and handing one piece back to him. They stood together in the quiet, the sounds of the forest surrounding them. For a moment, it felt almost peaceful, but beneath that peace was the knowledge that their journey was far from over, and the most dangerous part was still ahead. The forest was silent except for the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Kira stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes sweeping over the shadows. Every sense stayed sharp, ready to catch the smallest movement. She knew enemies could track them here, but she also knew the civilians needed this rest. The man was somewhere behind her, tending to the fire without letting it grow too bright. Hours passed slowly. The moon shifted behind the branches, and the forest seemed to breathe in quiet rhythm. Kira did not relax. Her instincts told her danger was not far. When a faint snap came from the trees to her left, she turned her head sharply. The sound was too deliberate to be an animal. She reached for her blade, her muscles coiled and ready. The man was already moving to her side. Figures emerged from the shadows, their armor catching what little light reached the ground. Council soldiers. This time, they were not a small squad, but a full strike team. Their weapons were drawn, and their steps were measured. Kira's claws tapped lightly against her weapon's hilt as she stepped forward. The man moved to stand beside her, his shoulders squared and ready for battle. There would be no chance to avoid this fight. The first volley of blaster fire lit up the trees. Kira darted aside, her blade flashing as she closed the distance with the nearest soldier. She struck hard, disarming him and sending him to the verge of ground. The man charged into the second soldier, using sheer force to drive him back. Around them, the civilians scrambled to stay low, shielded by the older survivors who gripped their makeshift weapons tightly. The battle turned into chaos. Flashes of light from blaster fire lit up the clearing in sharp bursts. Kira's movements were fast and fluid. Each strike aimed to end the threat in front of her. The man fought with a brutal efficiency, every blow breaking through armor. But for every soldier they took down, more stepped forward. The enemy was trying to surround them, to cut them off from the civilians entirely. A sharp pain flared across Kira's side as a blaster shot grazed her armor. She hissed, but did not slow. Instead, she pushed harder, driving the enemy back from the clearing's edge. The man was beside her, his face set in grim focus. "We can't hold them here," he said. She knew he was right. If they stayed, the civilians would be trapped between the soldiers and the trees. They needed a way out. Kira spotted the narrow path leading deeper into the forest. It was risky, but it was the only chance they had. "This way," she called to the man. He nodded without question, moving to cover her as she cut down the last soldier blocking the path. The civilians began to move quickly, guided by the older survivors. The sound of blaster fire followed them, but the trees soon swallowed the light of the weapons behind them. They moved through the forest in near darkness, guided only by the faint moonlight breaking through the canopy. The air was heavy and damp, every breath filled with the scent of moss and wet earth. Kira's ears twitched at every sound, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows. The man stayed close to her side, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. Neither of them spoke. Every moment was too important to waste. After what felt like hours, they reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. Far below, Kira could see the flicker of lights. The place the man had promised was beyond the council's reach. It was still far, and the open ground between them and the valley floor would leave them exposed. But there was no turning back. The man stepped to her side, his eyes fixed on the lights in the distance. "This is it," he said quietly. "Once we get there, they'll be safe." Kira nodded, her gaze sweeping over the valley. The journey had cost them time, strength, and blood, but they were still moving forward. She felt the weight of the civilians' trust on her shoulders, heavier than any armor she had worn. She also felt the growing certainty that her choice was already made, even if she had not spoken it aloud yet. Kira studied the valley below, her eyes tracing every path and shadow. The lights in the distance flickered like stars caught on the ground. Somewhere in her mind, the contract still echoed. Deliver the human alive. But standing here, with the civilians depending on them, she knew she had already broken it. The decision was no longer about credits or orders. It was about who she would be when this was over. The man stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "We'll have to move quickly. The council won't give up this chase." She glanced at him, seeing the same resolve that had been there from the beginning. He had never begged for her help, never tried to win her with lies. He had shown her the truth and left the choice in her hands. That choice now felt heavier than any weapon she had carried. They began the descent, guiding the civilians along narrow trails that cut into the hillside. The ground was slick from the earlier rain, and more than once, someone slipped, only to be caught by another. Kira stayed at the front, scanning for threats while the man kept to the rear, ensuring no one fell behind. Every step took them closer to safety, but also closer to open ground where they would be exposed. Halfway down, the first shot rang out. It struck the dirt near Kira's feet, sending up a burst of soil. She dropped low, scanning the ridge opposite them. Council soldiers were positioned there, their rifles glinting in the moonlight. The man shouted for the civilians to keep moving, his own weapon firing back toward the ridge. Kira moved fast, using the rocks for cover as she closed the gap on the enemy position. The fight was quick but fierce. Kira's claws and blade cut through the soldiers' defenses with precision. The man reached her side, his strength breaking through the last resistance. Together, they silenced the ridge. When the final soldier fell, the night became quiet again, except for the sound of the civilians continuing down the slope. Kira caught her breath, the cool air filling her lungs as she turned back toward them. They reached the valley floor just before dawn. The settlement ahead was small, its walls made from a mix of stone and salvaged metal. At the gate, guards stepped forward, their weapons lowering slightly when they saw the man. Recognition passed between them, followed by quick orders to open the way. The civilians moved inside, greeted by warm hands and quiet voices. For the first time in days, they were safe. Kira stood just outside the gate, watching them disappear into the settlement. The man approached, his steps slow but sure. "You could still turn me in," he said. "It would be the easier path." She met his gaze without flinching. The easier path is not always the right one. She knew the moment she said it that there was no going back. The council would mark her as a traitor, but she had made her choice. The man nodded once, a silent agreement passing between them. "Then you have my thanks," he said, "and my word that I will stand beside you when they come." She found herself believing him. It was strange. trusting someone who had once been her target. Stranger still was the feeling that this fight was only the beginning. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The gates closed behind them, shutting out the open world and the dangers it carried. Inside, the settlement was alive with quiet activity. People moved with purpose, preparing food, repairing walls, and tending to the wounded. Kira felt the weight of eyes on her, some curious, others cautious. She was an outsider here, but the fact that she had come with the man seemed to grant her a place among them. As the sun began to rise, its light spilling over the hills, Kira allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. She had come here for a contract. She had stayed for a cause. The council's reach was vast, and their vengeance would come. But for now, this place was safe. And for the first time in her life, she was not just a hunter following orders. She was a protector by choice.